Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Build a Solid Roadmap for Your Records Management Journey. My name is Ben, and with me is Natalie, and you can see our Twitter addresses on your screen right now. If you've got any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out. Today we're going to cover 3 topics: why roadmaps matter, modern workplace trends, and how to build a roadmap. Before we do, I thought I'd give you a brief introduction to Habanero. At Habanero, we're passionate about helping organizations become better places to work. We believe there's so much untapped potential in today's society that can be unlocked by helping people build exceptional careers and helping organizations perform at higher levels. This is what inspires us to come to work each and every day. Habanero has been ranked a great place to work for 7 years and is placed #1 in Canada twice. We have a relentless focus on creating high-performing, engaged teams, both inside our organization and yours. We get immense pride by being on this list, but we're even prouder to see our clients there. We spend a lot of time helping organizations understand how they can become better places to work and supporting them on this important journey. When you think about what we do, it can be really broken down into 3 different areas. The first, cultural transformation and change initiatives. The second, intranets and the digital workplace. The third, collaboration and content solutions. Really the focus of our webinar today. What do these have in common? Well, our approach to all of these areas is to really help humanize the workplace. Habanero has offices in Vancouver, Calgary, and Toronto, and we're very proud to have touched down in Winnipeg late last year. Now I'm going to turn it over to Natalie, and she's going to talk about why roadmaps matter.
Thanks, Ben. As a consulting firm, we spend a lot of time working with business leaders across many organizations, in a variety of sectors, from big to small. We hear many stories and have started to notice that there are similar problems that many organizations face today. In order to illustrate why roadmaps are important, I thought I would share a story from one of our clients. Last year, we were engaged to help an organization begin to solve some big problems that had surfaced during an internal audit of their records management program. The audit surfaced some issues which many of you are probably facing in your workplaces. Digital records were not being filed in the records management system in a timely manner, and in many cases, not at all. In many cases, there were multiple copies of the same document that were living in many places, across many systems, which was making information request processes complex and time-consuming. And finally, there are a number of examples of individual departments and teams that had started acquiring systems for their teams to use to collaborate, which had no visibility or searchability for the records management team, and was actually putting some pretty important corporate information at risk. So we were asked to come in and address the issues by helping implement a new records management program. But we managed to convince them of the power of a road mapping exercise prior to going forward with the program design. Creating the roadmap with the team allowed us to step back and take a more holistic look at the future state of records management, document management, and collaboration for the organization, rather than just focusing on the problems outlined in the audit. Through a variety of research techniques, we were able to start to work with the team to envision a future for records management that was embedded in the organization, its work, its culture, and its people, rather than just an added responsibility mostly ignored. Once you have all of the problems and opportunities out on the table, an important aspect of road mapping is prioritization. You can't do everything at once. You have limited resources, people, and organizational capacity for change. So when we reached the prioritization phase of the road mapping exercise in this project, we used a technique of evaluating the choices we had to make against the project principles. Before engaging with us, the team had created a set of project principles which they thought clearly articulated to the organization why this work would be successful when it might have not been in the past. Well, we tried using the existing project principles to make some hard choices and found that they just made things less clear. There were debates about how the choices aligned with the principles and even what the principles meant. This little hurdle resulted in a big conversation in the development of an entirely new set of principles for the organization's records management journey. Thoughtful, and what we like to call sticky, principles out what's important. They help people stop and evaluate the decisions they are making, and also help the team communicate to the organization why or why not something fits within the current scope of the initiative. The 5 principles that were developed in this project team were as follows. Designed for the way people work. build momentum thoughtfully, foster trust in our information, be accountable together, and build what we can support. Designed for the way people work was a huge stumbling block for the current records management program. One striking example of this was that in their current RM system, users needed to put away content and access it based on a taxonomy that was aligned to the file plan. Not really how most people work. This issue surfaced over and over again as a huge friction point with people in their interactions with records management. The process of creating the roadmap helped us to think bigger and better. We were able to reevaluate the project principles, prioritize all that we had ahead of us, and begin the steps of digging deeper into each of the big buckets of work that they had identified as key to get them to a new way of working for the people. So what are the key reasons that roadmaps matter? We believe that there are 4. First, roadmaps help prioritize when everything needs to be done. Many of us can probably relate to the feeling of having to do everything and everything well. In many organizations we work with, there's an unrealistic expectation around what the organization can take on. The records management journey is a complex and multifaceted one. It touches the day-to-day work of everyone. There are internal resource constraints, budget constraints, and looking at the culture within the organization to bring about the change needed for a new program to be successful. You can't do it all tomorrow. Maybe not even next year. We need to be able to help senior leaders to prioritize the work that we have ahead of us. Second, roadmaps can help overcome a history of project failure. Some organizations have a history of bigger initiatives and those that touch all parts of the organization failing. Working with stakeholders, we often hear people say, "That will never work here. We have tried this, and nothing ever gets off the ground." Roadmaps and their creation can help build organizational buy-in and bring visibility to the project. They start to call out when people will need to be engaged and what they can expect in that engagement. You need a roadmap to help people understand why it's going to be different this time. Number 3, break down siloed visions of the solution and build a shared understanding of the purpose. As a team that delivers service to the organization, you probably have been in the situation where you have different business stakeholders with different expectations. You are being pulled in multiple directions, trying to meet everyone's needs. A records management program needs to work across an organization. It needs to meet the needs of the organization as a whole and work in conjunction with the many types of content, work processes, and systems that exist. It is fully integrated into the work that people do day to day, and so bringing this type of program in is disruptive. Getting a unified understanding of the vision and direction for the program is key to ensuring a program's success. Finally, roadmaps help you create change together. At HAB, we have significant experience in working through change in organizations. Through our experience, and it's also pretty well documented in research, people who feel part of a change will be much more likely to adopt the change easily. It builds trust and understanding with people. The process of creating the roadmap is a powerful tool in building the change for your initiative. First, it is visible. We advocate printing out your roadmap. Big! Post it in a location with traffic. Don't hide it away. As well, the roadmap should be shown to be a changing and living piece. People should feel that they have the ability to critically look at what's coming, make comments, suggest improvements. It should encourage a reevaluation of your initiative over time. It is not a pristine project deliverable. We should encourage people to add stickies or take a pen and add comments or suggestions on our roadmaps. Later this summer, we will be offering another webinar on modern workplace trends and how they may be shaping the types of programs and work that you have ahead of you in your records or document management journey. We felt it would be valuable to give you a run-through of them today just as a little preview. They fit really nicely with those 4 reasons that we just talked about on why a roadmap. The first trend that we're seeing a change in is our understanding of motivation. We have a much greater understanding of motivation and how it directly affects the success we see for programs and initiatives in our organizations. We no longer can rely on just the carrot and the stick. Instead, we need to involve the people that we're working with more authentically, engage with them early and often, and understand how we can bring value to them in the work that we're doing. This is one of the key benefits of using a roadmap. The second trend that we're seeing is that we have to be able to provide value beyond compliance. So no longer are organizations seeing compliance as just the end goal. They're seeing it as an output of having employees more engaged in work and good systems and processes that help them get the work done. This is a trend tied quite closely to the changes around motivation, and we explicitly use the value to employees in the business as a key component in any roadmap. The changing organizational structure. Traditional organizational structures are much less common than they once were. Organizations tend to be more fluid and flat. Interdisciplinary teams are formed for the purpose of getting work done and then may be disbanded and reformed in another way to meet another need. We need to be more agile in our approaches, willing to change direction, adapt to new ways of working, and roadmaps are a good way to show the interconnectedness of work that takes place for your records journey. Open information and privacy. There is a great expectation from citizens that information will be available to them to make decisions. We expect current and timely information on everything from subway schedules to government policy. This expectation of being informed and being kept engaged is changing the expectations for the way we participate at work. But there is a fine balance which must be struck between the promise that open information brings and the privacy concerns that come along with it. Engagement will help out some of these considerations for your RM program. The new world of iteration. The pace of change is fast. Decisions, particularly when it comes to technology tools, can be outdated by the time you make them. For this reason, there is a shift to delivering smaller solutions more quickly and circling back and improving them over time. We need the ability to be responsive to changes within the business and external factors which affect how business functions. Roadmaps encourage us to reevaluate our approaches over time and break things into small, more iterative pieces of work. Cloud technology is no longer a promise, but it's a reality that we're dealing with every day. It does come with a shift, though. More applications are being served to us as a subscription model. Because we need lighter, more agile solutions, they need to be able to adapt since software changes will be coming to us quickly and updates often happen whether we want them or not. Software is being developed in a more iterative fashion, and so our solutions need to be prepared to meet that challenge. The role of failure, insights, measures, and evidence. Evidence-based decision-making has long been a goal for most organizations, but today, with the availability of data and the ability for us to much more easily collate it, use it, present it, there's much greater promise for how we can make decisions in the future. We see this all over in our consumer life, where solutions are built to collate, say the price of a hotel room, from multiple data sources and present it to you in an easy way to act and evaluate. Roadmaps are records of the factors that affect our decision-making in our RM programs, and so fit very nicely into this new workplace trend. And finally is the role of AI. Much of the work we do around our records programs is becoming automated. Whether it's auto-classification of documents when they've been scanned, or tagging using content analysis software, we are starting to see the promise of some of that repetitive work that we're doing becoming outsourced to technology. We need to be on top of the possibilities and look for ways to incorporate them into our roadmap so we can ensure that our strategy still can be lived as intended. So we've taken you through the basics of why you might want to consider a roadmap. And now we can shift and begin to talk to you about how you actually can accomplish this task. As you might suspect, in this short session, we can only give you some of the basics. You can find out more information on our website. So I'm going to turn things over to my colleague Ben, who will take over from here. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalie. Some of you might have been part of a technical solution implementation, and perhaps some of you have even built a roadmap. Maybe it looks something like this. Everything mapped out, activity by activity, with 7 years of backlog ahead of you. How is it possible to know from a technology perspective what's coming in 7 years? Generally, what we found is a roadmap like this ends up in a detailed report and maybe in a binder on somebody's shelf. The roadmaps we're going to introduce you today are very different. They're not just lists of tasks or initiatives documented out for the purpose of planning. They serve a much bigger purpose. When we take a peek at Habanero's road mapping approach, it's really broken down into 3 different areas. The first, understand your organization's story. The second, capturing today's experience. And the third, creating that future experience you want your employees to have. So let's take a look at number 1, understand your organization's story. At Habanero, we use roadmaps for pretty much everything from our culture and transformation work all the way to records management work. I think what makes records management special or different is that not only do you have to understand your organization's story, but you also have to understand your organization's regulatory environment. To understand your organization's story effectively, we believe you need to conduct research. However, it's not uncommon for us when we engage with clients to be told, "Oh, no need for research. We've got the requirements document." I take you back to the story that Natalie told at the beginning of the presentation. An audit surfaced a number of deficiencies that needed to be remedied in a records management program. We could have started there, but we chose to step back and do some additional fact-finding, some empathetic people research, and look to surface some of the bigger organizational struggles that would affect the project. None of that information was in the audit, nor would it have been in the technical recommendations document. We believe you need to start bigger. We have to understand, too, that the solutions we're creating have to live within a culture in an organization. I love this quote. It's by Kim Philby, a Soviet spy, and it says, "I learned more at cocktail parties than by photographing documents." And I think for the things that we work on, this is actually kind of a neat analogy. We find we learn so much more talking to real people and users than by looking at requirements documentation. So when we look at the research we conduct, there's really 5 different things that we look at. The first is stakeholder interviews. The second is listening labs. The third is the regulatory environment that we're working in. The fourth is our content inventory. And the fifth, and often forgotten one, measurement. I typically like to start with stakeholder interviews where you spend time with the different leaders in your organization. I like to get to know different areas of the business. I like to learn about the opportunities, the goals, the objectives of each leader, as well as the challenges. I find often when we look at these things at a more holistic perspective, we can find some really interesting areas of the business and challenges that we can address with our program. My favorite part of research is listening labs, where you spend time with employees in their natural habitat, learning about the work that they do, how they do it, and the tools that they use. You can do these remotely, but personally, I love spending time in an employee's natural habitat, if you will, learning about how they work. And I think there's so many clues and great pieces of information that their physical environment gives you. I love to look at all the things on the wall. I love to look at the paper on the desk. And I really like to dive in and understand how they work and why they do the things they do. I've never left an employee listening lab without learning something. You always do take something away in it. So if you've never done it before, I definitely urge you to spend some time with your employees learning how they work. It's so insightful. In addition to the listening labs, there's a number of different workshops you can do to better understand your employees. Here's an example of a workshop we did with a number of employees in an organization, and it was really to uncover all of the various pain points at work. So you could see here, we asked them to write down, what are all those things that really frustrate you? And we had them organize them, so things at the top were the things that really made them angry, that really frustrated them, whereas the things that were on the bottom, they might have been frustrating, but they weren't necessarily as bad as the things at the top. And then you can see here on the left-hand side, we've got things that maybe were quick. They were frustrations, but they were actually quick to resolve, versus things on the right-hand side that took a long time. And when we look at this, the quadrants really give us an indication of priority. The top right quadrant items are the highest priority because they're the pain points that are associated with the highest frustration, and they consume the most time. Top left quadrant items are second priority because people still associate them with high frustration. They just don't take up as much time as the others. The other items in the lower quadrants are still pain points and shouldn't be forgotten, but can likely be deprioritized in relation to others. Another type of workshop we've done is one where you look at all of the valuable work your employees are doing and you ask them to write on stickies, what are all those things that you do day to day that add value? And we use a quadrant system for this as well, where things at the top of the screen are higher value, whereas things at the bottom may be lower value. And things on the left are things that are fairly quick, whereas the things on the right are things that take longer to do. And again, the quadrants give us an indication of priority. The top right quadrant items have priority interest because they're the jobs that are associated with the highest value work and consume the most time. The better we understand this work, the closer we are to understanding the core value that your employees are creating. The bottom right quadrant items are second priority because these are the time-consuming, low-value tasks that are robbing people for high-value effort. You're also going to want to evaluate your compliance needs. Is your file plan up to date? And does it actually represent the content that your organization is currently creating? Maybe you've been through a merger or a structural reorg or even taken on a new line of business. Each of these will require you to examine your compliance needs. You also want to make sure that the regulatory environment hasn't changed. For example, what might you need to do to align with the new Canadian standards for electronic records? These are all things to think about. You're also going to want to conduct a content inventory. Now remember, this isn't a comprehensive audit. It's really a chance to get an overview of the content. Where is it all stored? How much of it is there? And look for trends and outliers. Of particular focus is content that's used by specialized software or needed or generated by transactional systems. We also want to look at who needs content and how many people collaborate to create or use it. And measurement. This is something that we see a lot of organizations really struggle with. It can be really easy to define usage metrics, but we really want to go a step deeper. We want to understand, what is the organization measured upon? What does success look like for the organization? What does success look like for teams and individuals? We're going to want to make sure that the things that we're measuring actually matter to the organization. And ideally, we want to show how our records management program is delivering value and helping the organization meet those goals and objectives. So after we finished all of our research, we often see a number of big workplace themes emerge, which takes us into number 2, capturing today's experience. One of the most powerful tools we have to capture today's experience is journey mapping workshops. We like to compile kits that we send out to each participant in advance of the workshop. It's really important that they feel prepared, confident, and able to contribute. The kits include an invite that calls out why their personal insight is really important to us, our journey mapping templates, sticky notes, a Sharpie pen, and a sticker sheet of emotion words to help people get started with often what's the hardest part, talking about their feelings. Here's one of the journey map templates that's being completed by a workshop participant. So you can see at the top there, they've got all of the different activities they do. In this case, the task is really to find past work and leverage it. You can see how they're feeling in the middle there. So, they're feeling okay, they're ready for a struggle, they're hopeful, and then they move to distrustful and defeated, and their last hopeful effort, and then, desperate. And you can see there what they're thinking as well. And so this is a really interesting way to understand how your users are thinking and feeling around a specific journey, in this case, looking for past work. I find the Journey Map workshop so insightful. You learn how your users work, and you really get a ton of really valuable insight and information. This was an actual quote from an employee of a client who said, when we can't find a report we created, we go to the municipality where we submitted it and pay them $50 to give us a version of our own report. It's embarrassing. So you can see here the inability to find past reports of work was impacting people in this organization in a big way. Imagine having to go to your city hall to pay $50 to find a report somebody in your office wrote. Obviously, this was having a really negative impact on employees and was something that their records management program could fix. So in summary, journey mapping helps make a person's experience of something visual so that we can understand it from their perspective. It also helps us gather insight and understand all the pieces and how they work together to deliver that experience and the highs and the lows. So now that we've got all these insights and opportunities in place, we're now able to think about the future experience. We typically like to take a big wall and start to hash this out. So you can see here at the top, we've got our journey map. So we tend to have a journey map for every journey that we look at. We've got the experience that we're working on. So it might be leveraging past work or finding templates or initiating a project. We'll often combine these with sketches for ideas. So what could that new experience look like? You don't have to be a great artist to sketch things out, but it can be a really powerful way of illustrating or showing how that new experience could really help people. And finally, we like to look at the prioritization criteria. Prioritization can be a challenge for many organizations. One technique that we found really works is these prioritization cards where your workshop participants fill in what's the business impact. So you can see there they can sketch, is it low impact, medium impact, or high impact? What's the audience size? Is it for one person? Is it for a small group? Or is it for the larger organization? It often surprises me how high some features will be prioritized, even though they've got a very small but sometimes vocal audience. What's the effort to complete the feature? And then finally, what is change readiness, or what's your organizational change readiness for this? One thing when you're prioritizing is not to forget about your dependencies. There's likely some technical dependencies that you'll need to complete. Sometimes these won't have a lot of business impact. They won't be for a large audience size, and they take a lot of effort, but they're the foundational pieces that you need to implement before you can do some of those higher value features. Now you can start to see the roadmap come to life. We've got our capabilities in the blue, we've got our sketches, and we've got our prioritization. We find that doing this on a wall is the best because you can collaborate with different stakeholders and participants and move things around before your roadmap starts to become a kind of more beautiful electronic version. So this is what a completed roadmap looks like. And don't worry, I know it's hard to read. We'll have our email addresses on the next slide. And if you send us an email, we'll send you an Excel template where you can actually create your own roadmap. So you can see here, these are often really big posters. We put them on a wall. They're great to have people kind of walk up and look at them and read them. They're also really ideally living documents where people will take them and put sticky notes on them and put their own comments. So as opposed to burying all this information in tons and tons of documents, you've got this one really powerful document that tells a very important story. So I'm going to take you through that right now. So you can see here the roadmap is broken into phases. In this case, we've got 1, 2, 3 major phases, and those kind of continue along the right-hand side of the screen. You can see we've got these vertical stripes, and these are really our capabilities or business problem areas that we're going to tackle. So you can see here we've got business problem number 1 to be tackled, we've got business frustration number 2 to be eliminated, and that horrible workplace experience number 3 to be fixed, and so on and so on. So at the top of our roadmap, that first kind of quarter of it is really the problem description, the characteristics, and our solution ideas. So this is where we describe the problem. We might have some opportunity sketches, and we'll talk about the experience touch points and actions and perhaps some potential first steps. Below that, we've got our value and prioritization criteria, and I think this is one of the most important areas of the roadmap. This is where we talk about what's the value to the employee, what's the audience size, What's the change aptitude and what's the business impact? As well, of course, we want to talk about the effort and the cost and what are those key metrics. And I think so many roadmaps, when we look at them, they don't talk about the value to the employee. They don't talk about the key metrics that we're going to measure. They really focus on things like effort and cost. And below that, we've got our conditions for success. So what people and roles do we have to have in place for this to be successful? What are our processes? What information and data considerations do we have? And are there any best practices or rules? And then finally, we've got our potential tools and technologies. And I think that's what makes this roadmap so special, is that so many roadmaps are really focused on implementing tools and technologies. And this kind of reverses it. This is really the bottom part of the roadmap. Our roadmap typically or always really starts with what is the business problem we're trying to solve and what is the value to the employee.
Thanks, Ben, for taking us through that. We know that was a really fast journey through road mapping, but I hope you can all take a little something that you learned there and are thinking about ways in which you can incorporate road mapping into your records management journey. To do things like help prioritize that work you have ahead, work to overcome possibly some project failures that you've dealt with in the past, to help your organization come up with a unified vision for the purpose of your work, and to also build a change together to make your program successful. We know that starting a road mapping journey can be tough, so we have made available a template of our roadmap, which you can use. It has some ideas on it that can help you get started. If you would like a copy of that, please reach out to either one of us. You can use Twitter, through email, LinkedIn, whatever you like if you want a copy of that. Ben and I would like to thank you for joining us today. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out.